This workshop is really sponsored by, in a sense, 4 different groups by the Church Connection Initiative between Christian College and by Christian Service Ministries, which is a ministry of the deacons, right, of the Chicago area, the Christian Home Church, and then also Disability Concerns, and then the books were provided to you free by a grant from the Lilly Foundation, so I'm very thankful that is possible that we can do that. I just wanted to say just a little bit more about our ministry and Disability Concerns. We have been working mainly in the Christian Reformed denomination for the past 25 years, about 26 now, helping churches find better ways to include people with disabilities in the full life and ministry of the church. And we have a variety of resources. You can find a number of these resources on our website, which is at crcdisabilityconcerns.org. And that may be one of the handouts you received. Yeah, I think at the end of the green handout there, you'll see that website, so you don't need to write it down. But there's 2 one-week devotionals that are very nice, written by a woman named Barb Moon, who is a real expert in the whole area of inclusion within churches, and she's done a very nice job with those. There's a whole variety of worship resources, caring resources for starting support groups and that kind of thing. We also have a newsletter that we publish called Breaking Barriers, and that also is found on the website, and we also mail this out in bulk. About 65,000 subscriptions to churches and individuals. You should have received one handout this morning, or maybe you grabbed both, but the green one is the regular size font, and the buff color is the large print font. So this is for your sake, but also a bit of modeling to help you think about inclusion, that within your own congregations, that you can think about that there are folks who may have different kinds of needs than other folks, and you can think about, okay, how do we make sure that we give that kind of inclusion that we want to have to accommodate those who may have different kinds of needs. This workshop is based on this book, A Compassionate Journey, which you just received a copy of tonight. And it was written by John Cook and is co-published by Disability Concerns and Faith Alive Christian Resources. And the whole purpose of this book is to help people in congregations learn better how to come alongside people with long-term needs, whether disability or chronic illness. And we put the book together in such a way that it can be used by care teams within churches, whether it's the council members or board, whatever you call your leadership in your church, or some churches have Stephen ministry, some churches have what are called elders or deacons. And there's a sample workshop in the back of the book that so people can read the whole book and then gather in the church and focus on for an evening. Also, we put discussion questions at the end of each chapter, so that if folks, say at a care team in church, each have a copy, they can read a chapter, and then each month at their regular meeting, they can take 20 minutes or so to discuss that particular chapter. So what I'm hoping is that you'll think of this time that you're here tonight not as the end, but the beginning, so that you can take this to your congregation, and you'll be experts now when you leave here tonight. And then for those areas that you still need a little help, you'll make sure that the folks in your church, the care teams in your church, get a copy of the book, and then you can take time to discuss it together, because we'll do a little bit of discussion tonight, but the real learning and the real growth and the real help that's going to happen in your churches is when you take time as caring groups in churches to think about the particular individuals in your church for whom this applies. Well, thanks to Jan for the devotional. I was going to have, sometimes I do devotions with this group, but what I'd like to do is just ask you to take, and we'll do this several times in the evening, and I think I'll ask that you just do it in pairs. But pair up, please, and why don't I ask that if you're with your spouse, that you not have your partner be your spouse, But pair up, please, and just spend a few moments sharing a personal experience of a long-term illness or disability of a loved one or a friend, or perhaps your own experience of disability. And I'll give you 4 minutes to talk about that. Just a word on confidentiality. If you talk about someone other than a loved one, please keep names and identifying details private.
Was in denial, so glad I can't make it.
We have a few goals for the time that we have together. First of all, to understand better the personal implications of living with disability or with chronic illness. So just to get a basic understanding about that, and I'm very thankful that Kim is here tonight to talk about that from personal experience. I can talk about it secondhand a little bit as the father of a child with a disability. Another goal is to acquire tools and skills for more effective caring. So when I give you some tools that you can take from here tonight and say, yeah, that will be helpful as I interact with certain folks in my church, and I hope with all the folks in the church. And then third, to envision more effective caring in your congregation. So the third one is more of an overall perspective. How can we take this some of the basic ideas and tools and begin to use them in a broader way within the whole congregation to envision how do we make our whole congregation a more caring group, a more caring body. So in terms of gaining perspective, I'd like to just say a little bit more about myself. Our daughter Nicole was born extremely prematurely, spent her first 6.5 months in the hospital, and experienced a lot of complications right after birth, so that now, as a 21-year-old, she lives with severe impairments. She's not able to speak or walk. She needs to be cared for completely. The first 18 years of her life, we took care of her at home, and now, the past 3 years, she has been living in a Christian group home, not too far from our house, called Harbor House Ministries. And we're very thankful for Harbor House. It's a very caring place, and we didn't expect that she was going to move out of our home quite as soon as she did, but the Lord worked things out, and that's what happened. It's easy to think about disability in terms of a limitation perspective, and that would be kind of a limitation model for disability. But I'd like you to be thinking tonight about a different way of thinking about disability as a gift model, that people with disabilities are not just their disability, it's not just a limitation, because the fact is, of course, that all of us are limited in a whole variety of ways. But people with disabilities also bring a whole variety of gifts, and that's true also within the congregation. And that's very important to be thinking about that, because one of the ways for someone with disability to begin to come toward healing and wholeness is to know that they haven't been set aside and put on the shelf, but that also persons living with disabilities have gifts to be able to offer to the life of the congregation and to other folks, that they're not just needy, that we who are able-bodied will help the people with disabilities, but that we who are members of the body of Christ will share with each other and give our gifts to each other. Just one example of our daughter, in spite of her severe limitations, one of the gifts that she brings to our church is her delight in worship and her delight to be together with the people of God. And she reminds us all about how good it is, and sometimes she'll wave her hands, and at least most of us Christian Reformed folks don't do that a lot, so that's great to see her doing that and reminding us about that. She'll make happy sounds, and sometimes she'll start clapping. And I always enjoyed that, especially if I was preaching. She'd start clapping. That was a good thing, because most folks don't clap when I preach, so that was nice that she did. But that's just one example, and we can give lots of other examples too. And so it's good to remember that each of us is a human being. Each of us is an image bearer of God. And within the body of Christ, each person is a member of that body. And the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 12 that those that we think of as weaker members, and I love that phrase. He doesn't say the weaker members, because that right away is a judgment. He says, no, we're all on a par with each other, but those that we who are able-bodied think of as weaker members are, and here's the word he uses, indispensable. And that's just the opposite of the way folks with disabilities often are thought of in society and the church, as dispensable, as not needed, as put on the shelf. But Paul says, I think it's 1 Corinthians 12, verse 22, they're indispensable. And that's good for all of us who are temporarily able-bodied to remember, because all of us are only temporarily able-bodied. Most of us, as we get older, will likely live with a disability of one kind or another. It's not about them and us. It's just about us as the body of Christ. A little bit on what's normal. If you picture a circle and have the word normal in the middle of it, then most of us do this. We define normal as people who are a lot like me. And those are the people that are inside the circle. And people are a lot like me in terms of ability, in terms of color of skin, in terms of culture and language, in terms of income level. And then what we tend to do is we put a certain, an edge to that. And then the folks outside the circle, if the folks inside are normal, the folks outside the circle would be what? Abnormal. Right. I hate that word normal, because that immediately divides people in that way. That's just a basic way of thinking about bias or prejudice. That these are the inside folks that are like me, and I feel comfortable with them, but anybody outside that circle they're different, they're abnormal. They don't really quite belong. And we tend to do that also with disability, just as we do with race or language or income level. And so with disability, what we do is we think about normal folks, and we build the buildings for the normal folks. And normal folks can climb steps, so we put steps in buildings. And normal folks can fit in a bathroom stall that's a certain width, and they can fit through certain size doors. Normal kids can learn in certain ways, and so we structure our Sunday school programs in certain ways. Normal people can hear in certain ways. They can see, and so we project our things on the screen. Normal people can stand up, so we project things on the screen, and everybody stands up except for one who's not able to stand, and they see everybody's back, and they don't have the words in front of them. And then somebody else needs to use a wheelchair and can't get in a building because there's steps, and they can't use the bathroom because they won't fit in the stall. By the way, I heard a great quote about the importance of accessible bathrooms. If they can't go, they won't come. So we need to eliminate that whole idea of normal and abnormal, and we need to think about the whole spectrum of the way people are. And then we need to set up our programs, our buildings, and most important, our attitudes to recognize that everybody comes with gifts and that everybody belongs in the body of Christ. So this definition of disability actually comes from the United Nations, but I like it because like the U.S. defined disability in the Americans with Disabilities Act, but that's a legal definition that has to be used to separate out if someone has a disability, then they're eligible for a variety of services, and if they're not defined as having a disability, then they're not eligible for all these services and that kind of thing. And so it has to be a definition that stands up in court. What I like about this is that it's really much more useful socially. So let's think about this for a moment so we understand what we mean by disability. Persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments. Let's stop there for a moment. Long-term physical impairments would be a whole variety of things, whether it's somebody who has a broken back and then has paraplegia, or someone who has multiple sclerosis, someone who has, let's say, more and more problems with their hips because of osteoarthritis, those kinds of things. Mental impairments would be issues like schizophrenia, chronic depression, bipolar disorder. Intellectual impairments would be people who have what we would say much lower than average intelligence quotient. So often many people with autism, most folks who have Down syndrome, somebody who's been brain damaged because of an accident. And then sensory impairments would be especially visual impairment and hearing impairment. Now, what I like about this I think it's more of a description. What I like about this description of disability is that it doesn't stop there, which is what most of us do. We stop there, we say, this person who has multiple sclerosis has this disability. But this description goes on and recognizes that whole thing about normal and abnormal gets involved too, in the way that we as a church and as a society responds to the person who lives with a disability. So it's these people with impairments, and the impairments which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. And that's really important to remember that second half, that the way that the whole society responds also causes a disability to become much greater by putting in steps and curbs, by like I was saying earlier, by setting up Sunday school programs in a certain way, and all those other things. So we have to be thinking about what kinds of barriers, and folks in churches don't do this intentionally, but what kinds of barriers have we somehow erected that say to someone with a disability, you're not welcome here? And then what can we do to make sure that we reduce those barriers so that we can give that full welcome? And so that we can encourage people living with disabilities to take their gifts and use them fully in the life of the congregation. So it's, as I was saying earlier, it's moved from a needs-based to a strength-based model of disability, from a deficit model to a partner model. So in a healthy congregation, everybody belongs. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. And that word hospitality is a big, broad word that includes things like making sure that bathrooms are accessible, and Sunday school programs to include a child who has autism, and they will find ways to make sure that she can take part also. And then in a healthy congregation, everybody serves. Each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. So most of us have been through gift discovery workshops. And in those workshops, we're encouraged to take the gifts that we have and use them well, and take those gifts and use them in the congregation. But there's another part to that, and the other part is that we encourage this brother over here and this sister over there to take his gifts and her gifts and use them in the life of the congregation. And again, it's especially important in terms of the person who's living with a disability, to encourage him or her to say, what are the gifts that we can help you to develop and use well in church? All right, so some theological principles, and we'll go over these quite quickly. They're also printed out for you in the handout. All people are created in the image of God. God said, let us make humankind in our image. Jesus' body, the church, has many parts. It is one. The body is a unit, though it's made up of many parts. All believers are called by God. We are what God has made us, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand to be our way of life. All believers have spiritual gifts. There are a variety of gifts with the same Spirit, and all believers are invited to participate in God's work. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. So that's a real short presentation of the scriptural basis of what we're talking about tonight. Now, I'd like to say a little bit more about this part of dealing with disability, and then we'll spend some time talking about that at a very personal level with Ken Dignan. Now, of course, there's a danger in talking generally about living with disability, because that's going to be, of course, as unique as each individual who lives with a disability of one kind or another. But there's a common pattern, and that's especially true for someone who has been living as a non-disabled person, and then somehow disability comes into his or her life. And that's going to be a common experience that you'll have as you do ministry within your congregation. And that's true not just for the person with a disability, but also for the person or people who are caregivers in the life of that person. So the grief that comes with this sense of loss isn't just for one, but it's often for a whole group of folks. And I've heard people, a man whose wife developed multiple sclerosis, talk about our disability. And he wasn't trying to be cute. He was saying and recognizing that it's something that they share not just as a couple, but really as a whole family when his wife developed multiple sclerosis. So there's this loss that comes in a variety of forms. A loss of a function, like the ability to walk, or the ability to feed oneself. Loss of a part of the body, which is often true for people who have diabetes because of amputation. Sometimes it happens with an accident. Loss of a cherished role. For example, Grandpa loved to be able to be outside playing football with the kids when they got together at Thanksgiving and tossing the ball around, and then Grandpa has a stroke, and the next time, the next family get-together, Grandpa's sitting inside in his wheelchair watching the kids outside playing without him. And there's that role that he had with the grandkids that's lost in some ways because all of a sudden he can't do what he did before. Loss of an expectation. And to give a personal example, when my wife and I were expecting our first child, who's Nicole, we took a series of pictures of Bev standing sideways, month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, and she's starting to grow, and it's wonderful, and we have all these dreams, and we got a room that we're getting ready at the house, and that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, Nicole is born. And as she, of course, these really dramatic and difficult problems. She's on a ventilator, and we don't know if she's going to live or if she's going to die. And as time goes on, we find out about these severe impairments that she has as a result of brain damage and so on. So this child that we had been thinking we were going to have never came. So we lost the expectation. We had to grieve the child that we were expecting that we would have. And that's not for a moment to diminish Nicole and for the great gift that she's been in our life. But we had to grieve this expectation. Does that make sense? Okay, all right. So, let's, Ken, how about if we just have a chat now? I sent Ken some questions beforehand for him to think about, and I see you jotted some notes down of these as well. I really appreciate that we can have a chat. This is really the first time that Ken and I are getting to know each other too. We talked by phone a little bit, but this is great. And it's ecumenical too. We have Calvinists and Arminians sitting next to each other and delighting in each other in our Christian fellowship. So I'm very thankful for that. I'm sure it was predestined for this to happen. So Ken, please tell us about your earliest memories about contracting polio. You got them all in front of you. I'll just give all these questions. Okay, all right. So this is, I just put a whole bunch of number one here. Do you remember contracting polio? What was your life like in the early years? What kinds of therapies did you have? How did your parents deal with your disability? Did they receive help from others? How did other kids treat you in the neighborhood and school and church? And how was the church involved in the life of your family? So it's all about those early memories.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mark. And just to give a little more background, I was raised Roman Catholic, Irish Catholic on the south side of Chicago, and the oldest of 9 children living in Mount Greenwood, Illinois, 100 Leamington Home near Kedzie. And then I became a Christian, a born-again Christian. I was about 19, 20 years old, through a Pentecostal church, and of all things around the block, a place called the Stone Church, which those of you who live around here know is on the corner there. Then I ended up going into the Pentecostal ministry with the Assemblies of God. Then later on, I ended up getting a master's degree through there, but then a doctorate degree from a Baptist seminary. And I've been pastoring in Assembly of God churches, and now I've been in a non-denominational church with the majority of people from Christian Reformed background. Many people might know Marty Ozinga, and he's a concrete guy, and his family is a little bit here. He's the founding member of Eagle Rock Community Church, so I consider myself Christian of all backgrounds. So I'm in the middle. I can see Calvin, and I can see Arminian, and then I can look up and see Jesus. So I got them all pre-covered. So either way, whatever. If it's predestined or if we need to do more ourselves, I'm ready to go any way God calls. But as I think back, I was only 14 months old when I contracted polio. And in 1951, 60,000 Americans got polio that year. It was a very grave and severe epidemic back then for those of you who are old enough to remember. If you were my age, you probably heard from your parents. In 1955, Jonas Salk vaccine was then available, 55, 56. But as I think back, I can remember just trauma. I can remember challenges. I can remember that pretty much from my neck down, my parents told me I became like a rag doll. At 9 months old, I began to run and walk, and my father loved football and played it himself at Leo High School. He caught for the junior clubs in Wrigley Field, so we thought, here I am, and I was going to be a quarterback for Notre Dame, and they needed help for many years, especially now. But he dreamt that I could be there to help and be an athletic star. So I was throwing a football as a young child. But one morning in September 1952, I woke up, and they said I was limp as a rag doll, a severe fever they could tell. They rushed me over to one hospital and then ended up in Mercy Hospital. And they came back after many tests. And my father said when he laid me on the gurney, I could hardly get words out. But my father told me I was saying my ball. They wanted my ball. And he said he could only lay it on my chest and my arms couldn't even move. So I was pretty much paralyzed for quite a long time while the polio virus went through my body. And after it was done, pretty much many of my muscles from the neck down were affected. Polio is a virus that affects your spine, the electrical charges in your spine. That's why muscles can atrophy. Some had very severe breathing problems and had to have a trachea or had to live in an iron lung, if you ever remember those big pictures that look like a Flash Gordon type thing that people had to live in order just to breathe. But when I got older, I remember physical therapy. I remember my mother telling me you can do it, and walk, and all the exercises, and 6 major surgeries, and all the pain of being in casts and all that stuff. So I can remember the challenges. I was a fire hazard in kindergarten. So I remember I got to go for only about 2 weeks. Then I remember a conversation with the teachers and my parents saying, we feel if your son falls, he might make people trip over him and we might not be able to help him. So if there's a fire, he's a fire hazard. So send him home and we'll just let him go graduate on the 1st grade. So I felt kind of bad about that because I was looking forward to kindergarten. But I came home as a fire hazard, tried to figure that out as the 1st day of the kindergarten. Later on, I could hardly figure out a lot of other things. So as I think back, I do remember a lot of the physical challenges, a lot of the feelings of why me, and just going to have all the doctor's visits and the prodding and all that stuff. And then feeling quite odd, feeling out of place because I didn't know too many other people who were like me. And I would sit all through the 1st grade to the 8th grade at St. Christina's School, and every afternoon when they had playground, I was always by myself with a carton of milk. Looking out the window, watching every kid play dodgeball, kickball. That was way back in the dark ages, when there was no such thing as inclusion. So it was lonely, it was painful, it was hard, but I had a great family. I had a great Irish neighborhood with the O'Shaughnessy's, the O'Connors, the Fitzpatricks, who all lived next door. They all had big families, and they treated me like anybody else. I would try to maybe climb a sled or a slide or a swing, and I would fall and cut my head open. I would say probably maybe 3 or 4 times a year I'd cut my head open and have to get rushed over to the little company in Mary, and I had to have stitches put in, so they knew me pretty well. But I tried to be as normal as I could, and that kind of gave me a lot of courage, and that helped me out.
Now, when I've done this presentation in the past, usually I've talked about folks who have had disability come upon them in a way that this isn't on the sheet. I'd love to find out more about this from you. I assume that there's pretty much your memories of living without disability are pretty faint, and pretty much
very much not there.
Okay, so pretty much your whole life, all you've known is living with disability. Can you say more about the feelings of, in your book you talk about frustration, but frustration and grief, what's that like living that, you certainly felt that as a child. Do you still feel that now?
Oh, most definitely. I think it's something that a person like myself will never get over. Frustration is a high level. I think frustration in not being able to stand up when you want to. Frustration in never having been able to get yourself dressed. Total dependency on your mother, your father, your brothers and sisters. Total dependency on my wife and then my sons and then people around me. It's kind of a tough way to live. Especially, I think, whether if you know what a catheter is or a colostomy. Thank God I've never had to have those. But I can't help myself for either, as we say, bluntly, 1 or 2, if you want to call it. I've always had to have somebody help me with those 2 things. And I can tell you, think of that yourself, with somebody always having to know every time you got to go to the bathroom. And then when nobody's there. And then sometimes they have to hold a bowel movement for 3 or 4 hours. And there were accidents I had, not because I wanted to, but no one was even there. So I held my breath and did Lamaze as long as I could. and I went to 10 and then it came out. But anyway, I would say that's what's frustrating. Being dependent. I'm sure people who are paralyzed maybe can't talk or if they're in a semi-coma, I think, are people I've gotten to know now in my life. People who've been disabled. I've spoken at many conferences and met many people with disabilities. I think that's a normal thing we have in common. It's just a frustration that you want to help yourself. And to be at the dependency of others your whole life is a challenge to have to rise above, and I've only been able to do it with the grace of God. And if I would not have come to know Christ as my personal Savior in a deep way, I would not have been able to face the life I have been able to. So I can truly say that Romans scriptures that say God works all things together for the good is true in Romans 8:28. And then when Jan shared of 1 and 2 Corinthians 12. In my weakness, that I am strong. And that's truly what's helped me.
How did your parents help you to make that transition from childhood to adulthood? Were there ways that the church was also involved in your life as a child and in helping you to mature into adulthood? What were the ways that you were helped?
I would say my parents totally. And I know my mother was more of a tough, what you might call a tough drill sergeant. Her father had a mental breakdown and had to live many years in Manteno. If you know, there was a mental hospital back down there in those days. He ended up at age 35 being hospitalized until he died at age 60-something. So we always would go visit Grandpa Frank at Manteno. My grandmother, her mother, had breast cancer early in the years, and she lost a breast but kept working on her whole life. So my mother grew up without a father in the hospital and her mother having a breast cancer. So my mother looked at me and says, "You're not going to let this defeat you. You're not going to be called," in those days they used the word cripple. I mean, people say, "What should I call you?" Just call me Ken. But I mean, I've been politically correct, crippled, handicapped, disabled. I'm just Ken. And that's one of the hardest things to just throw in here. You just want to be known as Ken. You don't want to be known as Ken the handicapped guy, or how would you like to be known as, Betty the whatever, or Bill the whatever. You just want to be known as Bill, or Betty, or Ken. That's very difficult. Maybe talk about that later. But my parents were so supportive. And they always taught, and in fact, I did not associate too much with other disabled people. Now that was hard at first, because I was the only person I knew that was different in regards to the word different, like you're describing. So that was kind of rough. But it taught me to get along with people who did not have disabilities and to realize my parents wanted to train me to live in what they call the real world. So that forced me to get to know all my friends, to get to know people and associate with people, and to learn to think like somebody who didn't have a disability, but yet who had a severe one. So that's what my parents gave to me. And my brothers and sisters treated me like anybody else. They punched me, beat me up, break my nose. I'd throw things at them, So, I mean, they didn't say, oh, don't touch Ken, he's fragile. I'd get my leg up and kick him and run him over and hit him with a bat myself. 6 boys, Irish boys in a family, they couldn't patch the drywall quick enough. But it was an exciting place.
Parents of stock and drywall.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right, yeah. Well, you talked a little bit about some of the feelings that you had and some of the challenges that you faced. Maybe you'd like to say more about those, but also, who were the people who were most helpful to you in facing and dealing with those challenges? And you talked about your parents as well, but were there others too?
Yes, I was able to develop some very good friendships with people. And I'd have to say, probably one of the biggest things that helped me to develop a lot of my character qualities was music. I felt a beat inside of me. In fact, if I went over to those drums, I could play them. I felt back in the days when the Beatles were on, Ned Sullivan, and I would bang on the plates with a fork and a knife. I would hit the cups and have my own little cassette right in front of me at dinner. My parents would go crazy. So eventually I convinced them to give me a set of bongos. They didn't give me a set of drumsticks, but my mother and father went to a Chinese place and they had chopsticks home. So I used chopsticks on a set of bongos with a little gong cymbal stuck on a pencil and a piece of wood. So that was my first drum set, and I said, I can play. So I got my parents to get me a drum set when I was 12, 13 years old. And that led me into getting into what they call garage bands. And I would get guys in the neighborhood who played guitar, bass, and I became a hippie. Had long hair past my shoulders. I was a typical hippie, and I went to the concerts, saw bands like Jimi Hendrix and The Who and Led Zeppelin, and I'm dating myself, but I was there in the front row of the Argonne Ballroom, the Electric Theater, downtown, somewhere either playing at a concert or at a concert. And then I got involved in music. And that really was a beautiful thing, because people would look at me and they'd say, what do you do? I'd go, I'm the drummer. And they go, yeah, sure you are. So I'd play and they'd get their friends and they'd point to me, and sometimes I'd go with my little arm and say, yeah, I can play, kind of like surprising. And I was able to be the lead singer. I did most of the booking. So I was involved. We warmed up for bands like REO Speedwagon, Styx. We associated with, people. Kevin Cronin grew up in Oak Lawn, so we knew him, and he ended up being on REO Speedwagon. So we had a lot of contacts with the Chicago market of music, and we played all over the place.
So it sounds like by not being thought of as someone with limitations, but by being thought of as someone with gifts,
Yes.
not only by your parents, but also it sounds like
My peers.
your peers.
Yes.
And it sounds like that was true at school too, wasn't it? That your teachers and so on, that, even though you couldn't go out in the playground, you were encouraged to take the gifts that you had academically and use those in the classroom.
Right. Now in high school, back in the 60s, there was no inclusion. So when we went from my particular grade school to the nearest Catholic school, which was Marist High School on 115th, not far from where I grew up, I sat there with the brother, and my dad was talking, and they asked if they could put my classes on the first floor, because I couldn't climb stairs. Now, in all 8 years in the grade school, you sat in one classroom. You didn't really change classrooms. So high school, you had to change classrooms. So they said, no, we can't do that. If we did it for him, we'd have to do it for anybody. So then we go back, now what do we do? In all the public schools in the 60s and even 70s, if you had any type of disability, you could not go to your local grade school or high school, because they called you probably a fire hazard or something they couldn't help. There was a school called Spalding High School, and it was on the corner of Ashland and Helena, 2 blocks from Chicago Stadium. And there were probably 14 bullet buses that picked up disabled kids from all over Chicago. And one half of the school was for people with physical disabilities. The other half of the school was for people with mental or cognitive disabilities. So I went there for all 4 years. They picked me up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I got home at 5 or 5:30. And that was, I picked up people all over the whole city of Chicago. And back in the days of the tough race problems, I would go pick up friends in Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor Holmes, and we'd have to duck down, people would throw rocks at us. But I got to know red, yellow, black, and white. I brought friends home, and in my neighborhood, they were upset if I brought a black friend home, and they'd call my parents, what's your son doing? So I learned a lot about challenges, even in high school. So that was a bit of a challenge, because I couldn't go where all my friends were. But then I learned a lot about, well, I would have somebody have an epileptic seizure in front of me. I would see somebody writing with a pencil between their toes. And I'd go around because I could walk at that time. I couldn't walk well, but I still walked until about 12 years ago when I got post-polio syndrome. I can get into it real quick later. But I began to see myself as, my goodness, I could play the guitar, I could play the drums. I had a whole bunch of friends. I was a long-haired hippie, and here's these people would see me, and their parents would leave them in their house. They wouldn't get out. I'd say, you don't get out. I'd get on the Chicago CTA bus and roll down the aisle every day, because I'd always tell the bus driver, don't leave till I'm seated. If you know Chicago bus drivers back in those days, I rolled down many a Chicago bus driver with my friends.
A holy ruler.
That's right. I was a holy ruler before I knew it.
That's right. Many people who are not disabled see people with disabilities and assume they're not healthy and not well. I guess that often you would say honestly that you're healthy and well. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So in those times when you would say so, what do you mean by health? And what do you mean by doing well?
Well, obviously, health would be, I believe that God has made us body, soul, and spirit. And obviously your body can really affect how you feel in your soul, your mind, your will, your emotions. Your spirit would be the area where God would dwell as empty until Christ dwells in there. But I really felt, I always did feel the presence of God in my life, and I was always sensitive to God. But in my particular upbringing, God was a bit further away. He was harder for me personally to see. And I know many people from the Roman Catholic background can and do know the Savior and do know Christ. A lot of trappings and a lot of things have gathered onto it because it's the oldest denomination that there is. So I didn't really see the truth of Christ, and I was kind of confused. But I did always believe in God, and that really helped me. But then as I grew older and more into the things of the Lord, I began to see that, wow, God loved me. I have to admit, I grew up like a normal young man. And I had friends who had girls in the rock bands. All my guys in the bands, they get all the groupies. I was friendly to all the groupies. Say, hi, Ken, hi, yeah. And then I'd ask a girl if she wanted to date me. She'd start crying. I'd say, why are you crying? Because I just like you as a friend. I can't date you. I mean, you're handicapped. Look at you. They say things like that, and I'd go. So I never had a date, ever. No girl ever went to a prom with me or out for a burger or to a movie, and I felt I was cool. I felt I was handsome, but of course, I did feel at times like the ugly duckling or, like the prince who became a frog and needed one kiss and my arm would grow out or something. I don't know, but, just for some girl to give me a chance. So that was pretty tough at times. And I think a lot of people I've talked to later on, and we don't have obviously enough time, but I ended up meeting a wonderful woman in Iowa College, got married, we got 4 children. So I mean, that's a whole story in itself. But I think that that's really a hard thing when you really have normal desires, normal drives. And sometimes I've had to feel guilty speaking at disability conferences, whether it's for Johnny and Friends where I've done it and other places where I've gone. I see that a lot of people with disabilities don't get a chance to get married. And it breaks my heart. It breaks their hearts. And they look at me, how did you get to do it? I said, I really don't know. I have to say, but for the grace of God, I can't take the credit for it. It just happened to work out with God's help. So that's the thing that you can hardly even talk about, is that, how does that really happen? And can it happen? And should it happen? Yes, it should. It can. And I was fortunate enough to find a woman who, first off, she's not disabled. People think, well, 2 disabled people will marry each other. Kind of like when I'm a pastor, people would say, oh, here's a perfect guy to run the disability ministries. It's kind of like, if you're heavy, you'll do Overeaters Anonymous. It's kind of like, just because you are who you are. But I felt called to be a pastor. And I felt called to be a regular pastor in a regular church to minister to regular people. And God's graced me to do that for 33 years in 5 different churches. And that's something else in itself. But anyway, I'll get way off topic.
Yeah, my question was about doing well.
Yeah, doing well. Well, that's doing well because I was whole.
Sure.
I was able to overcome the feelings that I couldn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to feel a wholeness in myself that I believed with God, all things were possible. I could have dreams that I could write a book. I could have dreams that I could record a gospel record. I did. I had dreams that I could be on television. I had a television program that's seen on all over the country every Sunday in America, and I've done it for 10 years. So, I mean, I've been able to, not to be proud, God forbid, because if you're disabled, He keeps you humble, and He probably knows I need that because I get too big of a head. But the wholeness is that you can do whatever God's called you to do.